Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I've been noodling over and planning this video for probably over a year, which sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, but it's always been in the back of my mind because drugstore makeup starter kit videos were like some of the first videos I ever watched on YouTube. Not just like about makeup, but like kind of in general. I remember like trying to find products that worked well but that I could afford. Because when I really got into the makeup sphere in like 2014, 2015, I had just left college because I ran out of money and I couldn't get any more loans and I couldn't continue for my degree. I was like 6 credits short. And I came out and I had all these student loans and I was working a job that was just a little bit above minimum wage. So what little money I had left over that I really wanted to just like treat myself with, it wasn't a whole lot. So I needed to find products that I could still afford, but I didn't want to throw money at affordable products just to have them turn out to be, terrible products. So I scoured YouTube and I watched so many drugstore makeup starter kit videos, and I never had enough money to buy the whole kit. But some of the first products that I bought, there's 1 or 2 in here, but I bought them on the recommendation of those starter kit videos. And ever since, like when I started my channel, I've always wanted to do a drugstore makeup starter kit video. But nowadays, with inflation and with the world and the economy the way that it currently is, the price of drugstore makeup has gotten kind of insane. During one of my last Ulta hauls, I mentioned that there was a drugstore foundation for $20, which is insane for a drugstore foundation, but the prices are creeping up there. So now, in today's 2024, there are certain drugstore products that are up there with what you can buy at Sephora. So now it's harder than ever to find truly good affordable products. So that's a con. But on the flip side, I've noticed particularly in the last year and a half, there have been so many good drugstore products that have come out. And I think I finally now have like a good assortment of products to do this video. So I'll have every product listed down below, but we're going to walk through vaguely in the order I would apply these to my face and talk about the products that I wish I could have had in my own drugstore makeup starter kit way back in the day. So let's go through all the products that I've gathered for the drugstore makeup starter kit I wish I would have had. And because prices are a little bit everywhere nowadays, I went and I made sure every single one of these products was under $20. Because to me, at least nowadays with inflation, $20 is kind of the cutoff point. Like it's under $20 to me could still be drugstore, could still be affordable. Above $20, you're kind of looking at mid-range, you're looking at Sephora, you're looking at the other side of Ulta, right? Before we jump in, I hope you guys will subscribe and hit that bell icon if you haven't already. We just hit 7,000 subscribers, just right after New Year's 2024. It was the best New Year's Christmas birthday gift I ever could have asked for. I am so appreciative to everyone who has subscribed. So if you haven't, I would hope you would consider doing so and joining our little community that we have. All right, let's jump into the products. All right, let's start with primer. And I've got the primer at the very bottom of the container here, but let's talk with primer. e.l.f. has been just like the king of primers, I think, for the last few years. But my favorite e.l.f. primer so far has been the Acne Fighting Putty Primer. This has just been so good. It is the putty texture that fills in pores, but the salicylic acid in this works on breakouts. And this is exactly what 2014 Monica needed in a primer. It helps makeup last longer, last a nice full day. It helps with pores and it helps with breakouts. Just like check, check, and check. So for a few of these, I have a couple of options listed, but for primer, this is the only option. This is the primer I wish I would have had. All right, so for foundations, I could go so many different ways with foundations. And unfortunately, some of my favorite affordable foundations have just been discontinued because brands love discontinuing everything that we love. But a fantastic foundation that I've used for many years that I would have loved, because this has got the coverage, this has the affordability, it had the shade I would have needed back then. It's the Catrice HD Liquid Coverage Foundation. I would have eaten this up in 2014, 2015. It is so easy to use. I love the packaging. I love the price point. I love how buildable coverage it is, because I was definitely going for more of a full coverage foundation back then. But this was so good, and it still is. My only current downside is that I'm using shade 002, and it's almost too dark for me. So I don't reach for it as often just because the shade is now slightly off, but it's a really good formula and I still love it. So now this is an option that I love now, and I feel like I would have appreciated having the option to mix this in back in 2014, 2015, because that was the era of combining different foundations together. You get the coverage from this foundation, but you get the finish from this foundation. Like, mixing foundations was such a big thing, and this would have been an amazing option to have for mixing, and that's the Missha Perfect Cover BB cream. I mean, the only downside to this is really like the scent. This looks amazing. This has medium buildable coverage. It is affordable. It's got great packaging. I actually really like the packaging on this. And it mixes well with different foundations, with different concealers. I used to love mixing this with Dermacol, and back in 2014, 2015, I was mixing Dermacol with everything because I love Dermacol, and actually Dermacol is coming up in the next section, but I would have really appreciated having this around. So the last product for foundation, I technically don't have because I used it up and I was trying not to buy it again, but it's the e.l.f. Camo CC cream. Again, similar to the Missha BB cream, but it's a bit more easily accessible than the Missha one. So I feel like back in the day, I could have found that e.l.f. at like Target or CVS, whereas the Missha, I really only see it online on like Amazon or at Marshall's. So I don't have the bottle, but I do have, they came out with a brand new hydrating version of the CC cream. Now, I don't have a full review of this one, which is why I didn't want to mention this one particularly, because I'm actually wearing it for the first time today. But just to have something to show you from the e.l.f. Camo CC line. Now for concealers. I feel like this is probably the only section where I actually had both of these products when I first started using makeup, and they're still really good products. And I feel like they were exactly what I needed back then, and they're still useful now. I've got the Maybelline Instant Age Rewind Eraser, and of course I popped off the spongy because I hated the spongy. The applicator was annoying, but this is a great concealer. Love this to bits. It's medium to full coverage, buildable, bulletproof for a full day. I could sweat through this. This is actually one of the only concealers to this day that I can wear in the summer because it'll stand up to all of my sweating, which might be TMI, but when I sweat on my face, I tend to start sweating like around my nose and right here, which is right when like your foundation meets your foundation meets your concealer, and a lot of other concealers would break down because of that. This one doesn't. It is amazing. So this one definitely. And then Dermacol, one of my actual holy grail products of all time, Dermacol Makeup Cover. You can use this as a foundation, you can use it as a concealer, a spot concealer, you can mix it in with foundation. Is there anything this can't do? I mean, it can't pay my taxes, but I feel like I can forgive it for that. So yeah, these two got me through my early makeup days, and they're still really good, and I feel like for anyone who's looking for good affordable concealers, you'd be good here. All right, let's talk powder. I definitely use a lot less powder now than I did back then, because back then, for makeup to last a full day when I am on my feet working. So if you didn't know, I used to work in a bookstore, and it was a university bookstore. So we had textbooks on one side, regular books on the other side. I walked to work, and then after I left that job, I had to take 3 trains to get to work. Every season, every type of weather. So I needed makeup that would stick. So that usually meant powdering down. So I went through a lot of powder. And these are all great options for powder. So I have 2 pressed powders and 1 loose powder. So the loose powder that was just my go-to and is still a really great option is the Maybelline Fit Me Loose Powder. Shade 5 is what I use now. Back then, I think I used shade like 15 or 20. I used to be a lot like tanner than I am now because I just don't go outside anymore. And I wear SPF every day, like we all should. But I love this. I love the packaging. I love the shade range. I love how the powder applies. It gives you a little bit of coverage as well because it is like a tinted powder. And I love everything about this powder. It is great. I've kept it. I have 2 of these right now because I bought a backup because it was on sale and I couldn't help myself. But I really love this loose powder. And I forgot what I used. I think I used the Coty Airspun powder back then. This would have been a much better option for me personally. And I do think it's still a great option now. All right, for pressed powders, I have 1 kind of regular face powder, and then I have a powder foundation. Now, I never, even back then, used powder foundation as a foundation. I would use it to set my liquid foundation just because it gave extra coverage, especially like where I needed it over like big breakouts. But the JCat Aquasurance powder foundation is an amazing face powder. It works so good at adding that extra bit of coverage, but still setting your makeup down so that it lasts all day. So I have this one, but my favorite face powder, like pressed face powder of all time, is the AOA Studio pressed powder. This is only $1 and just makes me look like I'm airbrushed. This is so good. And this would have been amazing for the 2015 Monica that was going through powder like it was water. I'm so glad I have this now. I have quite a few of them in my powder drawer. When I'm reaching for powder now, it's probably one of these. All right, getting into bronzer and contour. So let's start with contour first. So my current favorite like cream contour is actually from NYX. Oops. So my current favorite cream contour is from NYX, and this is the NYX Wonder Stick in the shade Fair. It's got a highlighter side that I don't really use this, but the contour is like the perfect shade. I'm actually like halfway through it now. Perfect shade, perfect tone, perfect color, and it's really forgiving and blends out really, really nicely, which would have been great for a beginner using cream products for the first time. And how do I know that? Because I really only got into cream products about a year ago. And this works great. And I feel like this would have been something that was a bit more approachable for someone who's getting into makeup for the first time. This for cream contour. As far as powder contour goes, I'm gonna add in like an honorable mention because I don't have it with me right now, but it's the Profusion contour palettes. They made like little dupes of the Smashbox contour trios, and the Profusion powders are just so good. Like they rivaled the Smashbox quality at like a quarter of the price. They're so good. I have a big Profusion palette left that I still reach for, but I'm specifically talking about like that little trio from Profusion. I think it has like three, like it had a highlight, it had a contour, it had a bronzer, and then it had some highlights on top as well. And that would have been amazing just as part of a drugstore makeup starter kit, because I think it's like $6 from the Profusion website. And those powders blended out beautifully. So definitely that one for powder. All right, so for bronzer, I also have one cream and one powder recommendation. So the first one is the Wet n Wild dual-ended contour stick. Again, I kind of don't really use the highlighter side of this one, though I feel like this one I might be able to use a bit more for like color correcting because it is like so light. But particularly for the contour side. Again, like the NYX one, this one is just very, very forgiving. It's a really good shade match for me. It doesn't look muddy. It looks bronzery, like sun-kissed, and it just blends out really, really nicely. I'm wearing it today along with the NYX. And again, I feel like this would have been a really good introduction to the cream bronzer world, because bronzer is something that you could, when it goes wrong, and you can look orange and muddy, and I've definitely looked orange before, but this would have been a really good intro to that. As for powder, I found from Milani, the baked bronzers are beautiful, and in particular, they look the most natural on the skin. So this is a baked bronzer in the shade Dulce, and this just looks perfect on my complexion. So if you're anywhere around a MAC N4, this will probably work for you. But Milani has a really good shade range here. And this, like the shade blends together, and it doesn't look like much in a swatch. We'll do a little bit right here. But when this is blended out on the skin, like on the face, it just looks like you got back from vacation. It's got a little bit of glow to it, a little bit of luminosity, but you can't see any flecks of anything. It just looks like you're glowing from within. This is one of the best bronzers I've ever found. Like, overall, not just from the drugstore, so I would have loved to have this in my kit at the beginning. All right, time to get into blushes. And again, for blush, I have a powder and a cream. And for the creams, I could not mention the e.l.f. Halo Glow Beauty Wands. These are beautiful. I have 4 shades here. I think they only have 4 or 5. If not, I'm hoping I have all of them because they are that good. Not only is this good, like from the drugstore, these are less than $10 a piece, and the colors, the shade ranges are beautiful, and the way they blend out on the skin. Like, it looks like blush, but when you blend it out with like a sponge, it looks very like skin-like and natural. It's so pretty. I can't get over how much I love these. And this, again, would have been a great introduction to cream blushes, because blush in particular, I avoided like the plague back in 2014, 2015. I didn't actually start wearing blush until I got the job at Sephora, and that was like 2018. And I was told particularly, like, your face looks a little pale. You might want to put a blush on. Try an orange or an apricot or a peach blush to go with your complexion. And then I did, and then it looked great. But the problem was, back then I got like really rosy cheeks whenever I was like working out or huffing up the stairs at the train station. So I didn't want to add extra blush onto my face to make it look a little, I thought it would look a little much. Now I love blush. But this would have been like a nice kind of entryway in to blush. Now for powder blush, I don't have the individual blushes here, but they are the Physicians Formula Butter Blushes. They are the most beautiful drugstore blushes I have found. So here I actually have the whole butter box. So I have, at the time this was made, all the butter blushes here in the middle. And in particular, my favorites are like the more peachy leaning ones, like this one, and this one has a nice glow to it. But these are just like, again, very forgiving. They blend out really nicely. They look pigmented, but they're not overly pigmented, because I feel like with a blush, especially for a beginner, right? Blush can be very harsh, and it could be like, once you put it on, I've seen a lot of blushes don't blend out nicely. Like, it just looks like the circle where you first put it on. These blend out really, really nicely and would have been nice to have, again, like, as a beginner for a drugstore makeup starter kit video. And I just realized this was like a really nice nude, kind of almost Rebel Rosy kind of color, and I was looking for that kind of shade of blush for a look the other day, and I forgot I had that. Because really, when I think about this palette, I think particularly of like these peachy shades. But they've got a nice shade range for the blushes, at least. So like for primer, for highlighter, there's only one option I could think of, and that's because this was heavily recommended back in the day in all the drugstore makeup starter kit videos, and I felt like it lived up to the hype. I really, really enjoyed this product, and I still own it to this day. The Physicians Formula Shimmer Bricks. They're really good. I like them. I really do enjoy them. So you've got like the bricks of color here. You've got some darker browns on the bottom, some lighter pinks on top, and this is in the natural nude palette. And then they have the warm nude palette, which leans a bit more, obviously warm, but like peachy pinky, and then you've got some more warm browns on the bottom. So I feel like this could work for a chunk of shade ranges. It's obviously not going to fit everyone, which is unfortunate, because I really wish they would come out with this in more colors, because they're really, really pretty and they look nice and blinding on the skin. But you can also blend them out if you want something a bit more natural. More often than not, I like the blinding highlight because I'm kind of, parts of me are still stuck in 2016. Sue me, but I really, really enjoy these. I love the packaging. I think they're super cute. They're super nostalgic to me, but I feel like the product itself transcends the nostalgia because it's still a really good product. So before we get into eyeshadow, let's talk about eyeliners, because there's one eyeliner in particular that I would have killed to have back when I was first doing makeup, and that's all the eyeliners from the NYX Epic Wear Liner Stick line. I just pulled out these 3 random colors, but I have like 10 of these because this formula is so good. These are gel liners. They're sharpenable, and they come in a bunch of like really beautiful colors, and they are pigmented and they stay where you put them. In particular, I love using these in the waterline. You put this in your waterline and it's there until you scrub it off. They look wonderful, and like they stay, and they are super affordable, and then you sharpen them so they last forever. I've never finished one of these ever. I don't think I ever probably will, but I would have loved to have this in every color. A white one, a nude one, a black one, a brown one. This could have fulfilled every eyeliner that I would have needed back then, and it would have lasted all day. Because my number one problem with eyeliner, because I loved how eyeliner looked in the waterline, but usually after I got to work, it wasn't there anymore. So this would have solved that problem. All right, it's time for the juicy stuff. Let's get into eyeshadows. Now for eyeshadow, I really had to think back to beginner Monica, because back in the day, I wasn't always like, it sounds a little condescending or like pompous for me to say I wasn't always this good at eyeshadow, because I don't know, it makes me sound pretentious. But it took a lot of practice to get better at eyeshadow, and I did not used to always be good at eyeshadow. I had to work and watch a lot of tutorials and practice a ton to get to a point where I'm really happy with my eyeshadow application. But back then, it was a lot tougher. So I had to think back on like what palettes would have really helped me and which ones had a good formula for, you know, now, but also like what would have helped me back then. And the number one thing that I thought of was a Zodiac palette. The original BH Cosmetics Zodiac palette, and it kills me that this is no longer available, because I feel like this had everything I would have needed. It's got all of my neutral colors, it's got some nice bright pops over here, you got a bunch of mattes, you got a bunch of baked shimmers, and to this day, this is the best baked eyeshadow formula I have ever found. They are so good. The only downside is that this big highlighter shade in the middle, you're supposed to use it as a face highlighter. It's not a good face highlighter. It doesn't blend out, but you can use it as a brow bone and inner corner highlight. It's way too much product for that, but it's better than just having something useless in the middle of your palette. So I feel like this would have been like my perfect everyday go-to palette because I could do like some nice neutral looks for work. I could do some nice bright colors for going out. I've got nice pops of color I could use in the lower lash line. I could get away with at work. I feel like this had basically everything I would have needed back then. And it was affordable when you could still buy it, and it has everything. So it's a little big. It's got a nice big mirror here. But I feel like if this was the only palette I was using, it being this big wouldn't be a huge deterrent. So another palette I was thinking of that I would have loved back then is from the brand Alter Ego. Now, overall, like Shop Missha, Alter Ego, I wish they were around when I first started doing makeup because they're great brands that are doing like really great affordable dupes and just great affordable products in general. But this palette in particular, the Sakura palette, I would have eaten this up because not only is it like a good formula, it's a good palette, it's nice shades, but I back then would have loved the trios of color. There are quite a few palettes that have this kind of layout to them. I'm thinking in particular also of like the Lorac Pro palettes that have that layout of like you've got shimmer and matte kind of matched up. This one goes a step further. This is kind of like that Persona palette where it's got the looks kind of lined out for you. Not Persona. What palette was that? Editing Monica will fill in the palette that I'm thinking of right here. But it was another palette where you've got like basically the looks kind of mapped out. And beginner Monica would have really appreciated having that because sometimes back then I would look at a palette and have no idea where to start. So having the option of having kind of all-in-one looks here, and again, you've got like some nice neutral kind of brown looks, and then you've got like your nice brighter kind of colors over here. I would have loved this palette. And I still do. I really like this palette. I think it's really cute. I love like the design. I love the packaging about it. But this would have been so nice to have back then. I also have an honorable mention for eyeshadows. I just want to mention the e.l.f. eyeshadow palettes, specifically their 10-pan palettes. This one, they've changed the name a couple of times over the years, but this is the Mad for Matte 2 palette. I liked their packaging in this black kind of sleek plastic packaging. They've changed it again because they always change their packaging. But this palette I've talked about for years. It's really, really good. And I do think overall, e.l.f. eyeshadows are more often better than they're not. Does that make sense? Most of the time they're pretty good. So I feel like a palette like this also would have been really nice to have back then. So last but not least, let's talk setting sprays. Because again, as someone who needed makeup to be bulletproof and who used a lot of powders, I needed setting spray. And back then I definitely could not afford Fix Plus. Like MAC Fix Plus, the fact that I have a couple of them right now amazes me because I could not even afford a single bottle of MAC Fix Plus back then. So I would have loved to have the Milani Make It Last. I think I eventually got this, but I don't know if it was around or easily accessible when I first started doing makeup. So Milani Make It Last is a great dupe for the Fix Plus. It melds all my powders together. So I wouldn't use this as my only setting spray. This is something I would put on before my last setting spray in order for everything to just kind of like settle. You know, it makes your powders look less powdery and it helps all your layers. Like in Photoshop, you take all your layers and you like, what's the word? Condense them? Flatten them? That's what this does, but with your makeup. I hope that explanation made sense. Now, a really good setting spray, I'll have to pop up a photo here because I actually don't have it on me right now. But Wet n Wild had a line of like cute little setting sprays. In particular, I need my family to stop group chatting me. But in particular, they had a rose setting spray. I think they still have it. That was an amazing setting spray. It smelled good. It was affordable. It had really good packaging and a really good sprayer on it too, I remember. And it made my makeup last all day. So I would use those two together, the Milani Make It Last and that rose setting spray, and I would be so set. All right, to round out this video, I wanted to do some honorable mentions for makeup like tools that I would have loved to have back when I first started, because I went through like so many different like brushes and sponges and kind of craziness, and I feel like that now more than ever there are really good affordable tools that you can use. So I gotta start off with the Shop Missha AOA Studio Black Teardrop Sponge. It's $1 and incredible, and also there's a Rex hair on it. Hello. But these are so good. I cannot believe I used to spend $20 on beauty blenders. It's wild to me. I've not bought a beauty blender in years because these are all I use. This is the only sponge that I use. I own like 20 of them, so I can use them once and then put them to the side and then wash them all together after a couple of weeks because I'm trying to only use these once before I wash them. But oh my god, these are so great. And if this, like, again, if Shop Missy had been around when I was first getting into makeup, I would have just used Shop Missy. They're so good. And in particular, like their sponges, I still only use these to this day. Speaking of Shop Missy, another product that is just so good and like amazes me compared to higher end versions of it is their flat top kabuki brush. Again, this is $1 and it's their flat top F1 brush. And this sometimes performs better than my more expensive like Sigma brushes, like my more expensive brushes overall. These perform better, which blows my mind, but I love this. I have like 4 or 5 of just this brush so that, again, I could kind of use them for a while before I have to wash all of them together. But these are so good. Again, if Shop Missy was around, I would have loved to have that as an option back when I was first getting into makeup. Now, this plastic palette was definitely more of like a nice to have back then because I was mixing, like I said earlier, mixing foundations was the name of the game, especially if you're only buying drugstore foundations and you can't necessarily get a perfect shade match. I would have to mix all the time to get a shade that would match me. And I used to just like mix stuff on the back of my hand all the time, but there were a few times when I would forget I mixed my foundation on the back of my hand and then it would dry down and I would forget it was there and I would go to work. There were a few times I had coworkers ask me like, what's on your hand? And it would just be like dried foundation from where I mixed my foundation and I forgot to take it off. So having something like this would have been really nice. It's just a plastic little hand palette. This one's from Real Techniques, but you just put it on your hand and then you mix your stuff on the palette and not your hand so that you don't end up like me and show up with foundation on your hands for work. This one's from Real Techniques, but I know Shop Missy has a good affordable one. I know e.l.f. has one. I know almost every brand now has a little mixing palette like this. And last but not least, again, I feel like every brand has one of these now, but just a color switch. I think actually color switch might be a trademarked term, but like just this little spongy thing that allows you to take the color off of your eyeshadows in between uses. This one I really like from e.l.f. just because I like the packaging and I like the size. It's a good size. I like that it's square, it's easier to store, and I think it's just really cute. Whoa, so I feel like I've been talking for hours, but that is the drugstore makeup starter kit of my dreams. I am so happy that I finally, after how many years I've been on YouTube, put one of these together. So let me know what you thought down below. What drugstore products do you wish were around when you first got into makeup? Thank you guys for watching, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. Bye.